My name is Sarah Evans, and I am 21 years old. Mom said life would be better without me, so I let her prove it. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. By Thursday, bills went unpaid, my sister cried, and CPS arrived at the door. We're sick of you making everything about yourself, Mom said, swiping over a signed agreement on the iPad I'd purchased for her. This limits you to sibling obligations only. No more pretending to be their mother. Sign it. My siblings, ages 15 and 17, stood behind her, death gazing back. Sarah, you're not that significant. Nobody asked you to do this. The irony was evident. My childhood ended at the age of 10 because I became the mother my siblings needed. All while our real mother was busy spreading her legs for her boyfriends. She asked me last week when my sister Elena would eventually become a woman. She had her menstruation 3 years ago. I smiled as I signed it, locking eyes with each of them, all full of entitlement. So why didn't you simply say it? If you want me to be a sister, you will get one. They smiled at each other as if they had won the lottery. The next morning, I awoke to Mom's victory lap. Everything's already so much better, she informed her new partner on speakerphone. Should have put my foot down years ago. My siblings walked through the house, ecstatic at their victory, eating meals I had prepared Sunday and wearing clothing I had washed. This is how a real family works, Mom stated to the house, not the Sarah dictatorship. At that point, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. On Monday morning, I treated myself to my first Starbucks breakfast and even got to test out the ice roller trend. Meanwhile, Mom learned the hard way that teens do not wake themselves up. My brother Marco skipped his first period exam. Elena arrived at lunch dressed in yesterday's clothing, her hair tangled, and with no money for breakfast. Mom was written up at work for being 2 hours late because she didn't realize the morning routine existed. By Thursday, the house had spoken its own story. I returned home to see my brother wearing his PE outfit to regular classes because every other shirt smelled like BO. Mom was on the phone begging the utility company for an extension. She didn't realize bills had due dates. Hey, Sarah, my brother replied casually, like if we were cool. Quick favor, can you grab me some deodorant when you're out? Sorry, that sounds like overstepping my sibling boundaries. Come on, sis, don't be petty. Petty? I opened the agreement on my phone. This specifically says sibling duties only. Shopping for you sounds like mothering. He walked away and grumbled something about me being emotional. The odor accompanied him for another week. Elena had her orchestra presentation on Saturday. I watched from the audience as she stepped on stage in her wrinkled, stained fancy dress, which I usually dry cleaned. Parents whispered and children pointed. When her teacher later approached Mom about the dress code dilemma, I spoke up loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh, we had a family restructuring, I replied pleasantly. I was overstepping by handling her concert clothes, so now Mom is in charge for the first time ever. Isn't that right, Mom? Mom's face grew white as other parents turned to gaze. We're reorganizing things. She made me sign an agreement, I explained, presenting the teacher. I'm not allowed to fill in as their mother anymore, just a sister. No more Sarah dictatorship. The teacher's expression changed from bewildered to concerned. Elena hurried to the restroom crying as Mom stood still, surrounded by scrutinizing parents. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. Mrs. Schneider was the guidance counselor. Sarah, I'm calling about some concerns regarding your siblings' welfare. Multiple teachers have reported, I have no authority over my siblings. I told them they've made that very clear, but you've always handled. No, they've set their boundaries, and it's my job to respect them. 20 minutes later, my mother stormed into my room, tears flowing down her cheek. Please, Sarah, CPS is coming. If they see the house like this, like what? You know what? The dishes, the laundry, the empty fridge, your brother's grades. Wow, sounds like a lot of mothering work. Good thing you're here to help. I'm begging you, just this once, help me clean before they ring. The doorbell rang. We both froze. The woman knocked. Hello, Mrs. Laurent, Child Protective Services. We've received multiple concerning reports. Mom glanced at me terrified. I smiled softly. Through the doorway, I saw the social worker's gaze assess the devastation. Dishes, mold in the sink, garbage overflowing. My brother has worn the same PE suit since Monday. She stepped through the threshold and her entire expression transformed. The stench hit her first. I could tell because her nose wrinkled up. Then her eyes widened as she took in the kitchen, which had green fuzzy stuff growing on dishes stacked everywhere and trash bags piled against the wall, flies swarming around them. Marco stood there in the same crusty PE jersey from 5 days before with large yellow stains under his arms. The social worker immediately brought out her tablet and began photographing everything. Mom stood there still like a statue as the camera clicked repeatedly. The woman strolled into the living room, taking more shots of the pizza boxes on the floor and the pile of filthy laundry on the couch. She opened the fridge and took a step back when she realized it was absolutely empty, save for a rotting container of something that had previously been leftovers. Mom finally came out of it and started chatting quickly. "This is just a bad week. We're usually much more organized than this." The social worker turned to her with a look that indicated she was not buying it. "Mrs. Laurent, we've received several reports from your children's school in the last 2 weeks about ongoing concerns." She pulled up something on her tablet. "Your son has been wearing the same clothes for days. Your daughter showed up to her recital in inappropriate attire. Both children have complained of hunger to their teachers." Mom's mouth expanded and closed like a fish. "I need to speak with each child separately, starting with Sarah." She gestured to the dining room table, which was really clear because I'd been completing my schoolwork there. Mom began to follow us, but the woman raised her hand. "Privately, Mrs. Laurent." We sat down and she gave me a warm glance. "Sarah, I understand there's been some changes in your household recently." I brought out my phone and showed her the agreement that I had saved in my photographs. "My mom made me sign this 2 weeks ago." Her brow furrowed as she read through it. "She forced you to sign this?" I agreed. "She told me I was making everything about myself and that I should just focus on sibling chores." The woman typed notes on her tablet. "What exactly were you doing before this agreement?" I took a deep breath. "Everything." She looked up at me and asked, "Can you be more specific?" So, I started listing everything out. I woke them up every morning at 6:30, made breakfast, packed lunches, made sure they had clean clothes, helped with homework every night, cooked dinner, did all the laundry, paid the bills online because Mom doesn't understand the computer, scheduled their doctor appointments, went to parent-teacher conferences when Mom was too busy. The social worker's fingers moved quickly across her tablet screen. "How long have you been doing all this?" I did the calculations in my head. "Since I was 10. She stopped typing. 10 years old. I nodded. Mom had a new partner who disliked having children around, so she was often gone. The woman inquired for specifics, and I told her everything. How I educated Elena about her period when she got it and Mom didn't notice. How I had to counterfeit Mom's signature on permission slips since she forgot. I learned to cook by watching YouTube videos because we couldn't afford takeout every night, and Mom only knew how to prepare cereal. She wanted to see Elena next, and my sister walked in with her hair matted and a shirt with food stains on the front. When the social worker asked her how things had been lately, Elena fell into tears. "I'm so hungry all the time," she cried. "Mom doesn't buy groceries, and I don't have lunch money, and the only thing I know how to make is cereal, but we ran out of milk." She explained to the woman about the recital and how everyone laughed at her clothing. Sarah always made sure it was clean and pressed, but now nobody does it, and Mom didn't even know it needed to be dry cleaned. She revealed she didn't know how to use the washing machine or the stove or even how to properly wash her hair because I'd always assisted her with everything. Marco entered next, appearing unhappy, as if he was wasting his time. The social worker questioned him about his clothing status. "Yeah, I've been wearing this for a while," he said, shrugging. "I don't know how to do laundry." She pressed him to explain, and he became defensive. "Nobody ever taught me." "Okay, Sarah always just did it." He informed her about failing his exam because no one woke him up and his mother had no idea what subjects he was taking. She tried to help with my math homework yesterday, but she didn't know what algebra was. The social worker inquired about meals, and he stated that they had been eating a lot of cereal and whatever snacks were left over from before. "I used the last of my birthday money on McDonald's yesterday." Finally, it was Mom's turn, and she entered with her head held high as if she were going to cure everything. We could hear some of it from the living room, with the social worker inquiring about times, and Mom not knowing what time school started. When asked about the kids' instructors, Mom couldn't name a single one. Mom was unaware about Elena's allergy or Marco's need for glasses. Then Mom's voice grew louder. "This is all Sarah's fault. She's being vindictive because I made her sign that agreement." The social worker's voice remained calm. "Mrs. Laurent, regardless of what Sarah is or isn't doing, you are the parent here." Mom started talking about how I was trying to make her look bad, but the woman cut her short. "Can you tell me your son's grade level, your daughter's shoe size, when their last dental appointments were?" Silence. The social worker returned and made a few phone calls directly in front of us. "Yes, we need immediate intervention," she told someone. "The home is uninhabitable. There's clear neglect. The children don't have adequate food or clothing." Mom started crying and grabbed my arm. "Tell them you'll help. Tell them this is just temporary." I stared at her gently. "You made me sign an agreement, remember?" Within an hour, 2 more CPS workers arrived with clipboards and cameras. They went around each area, taking photographs and making notes. They discovered a bathroom with black mold growing in the shower and a toilet that had not been cleaned in 2 weeks. They documented the empty fridge, overflowing trash, and mountain of filthy dishes. One of them discovered Elena's bloody panties in her room from when she didn't know what to do with her period this week and just left them on the floor. When they asked her about it, she burst into tears again, stating she didn't know how to cope without me. The case supervisor arrived in a black SUV and reviewed the papers. She was an older woman with gray hair who appeared to have seen it all. After reading all of the images and remarks, she turned to Mom with a serious expression. Mrs. Lauron, based on what we found here today, we're placing both minor children in emergency protective custody. Mom dropped to her knees, crying. Please, no, I just need more time to figure things out. The supervisor shakes her head. Ma'am, your children are living in unsafe conditions without adequate care or supervision. The supervisor's remarks remained in the air for almost 2 seconds before Mom sank to her knees. She grabbed the supervisor's slacks and began sobbing with unpleasant, wet sounds that made everyone uncomfortable. The supervisor took a step back and indicated to the other employees, who promptly headed upstairs. I could hear them take suitcases from the hall closet and open drawers in my siblings' bedroom. Elena chased after them, yelling that they couldn't touch her belongings, but one of the workers gently blocked her path, explaining that they were only packing some garments. Marco stood motionless at the living room doorway, as if his brain was unable to understand what was happening. In less than 10 seconds, his expression changed from perplexed to angry to afraid. The workers returned with 2 little suitcases that were pitiful given they housed everything my siblings would need for who knows how long. Elena was crying uncontrollably, snot pouring down her face, and her entire body trembling. She kept looking at me as if I was meant to repair things, but I just sat there, hands folded. Marco eventually snapped out of his freeze and began fighting with the supervisor about how everything was a misunderstanding. She gently stated that the decision had been taken and they needed to accompany her now. Mom sprang at me, grabbing my arm so firmly that her claws dug into my skin. Please, Sarah, just tell them you'll help. Her face was inches away from mine, and I could smell coffee on her breath. Tell them you'll take care of everything like you always do. I carefully removed her fingers from my arm, one by one. You made me sign an agreement that I wouldn't parent them anymore. She began shaking me and yelling that I was being harsh, but the supervisor moved her away. The social worker turned to me as the others dealt with Mom. Sarah, since you're over 18, you're not required to come with us, but do you have somewhere safe to stay? I nodded and informed her I'd already made plans to stay with my buddy Sophie and would be moving out regardless. She looked relieved and gave me her card in case I needed it. The workmen began walking Elena and Marco toward the entrance, and then everything exploded. Elena whirled around and yelled at me, saying, "It was all my fault. You did this on purpose." Her voice was so high it cracked. "You wanted us to get taken away." Marco simply stared at me with a face I had never seen before. It was as if he had finally realized that his acts had consequences, and he did not like it. They placed the kids into a black SUV while Mom ran after them, pleading for another minute. The supervisor had to physically block her from entering the vehicle. I looked from the window as the SUV drove away. My siblings' faces pressed against the back glass. Mom stayed in the driveway for another 20 minutes, staring at where the automobile had been. I packed my own bag and asked Sophie to come get me. Her mother picked me up an hour later and asked no questions when she noticed my puffy eyes. That night I sat on Sophie's bed, my phone buzzing nonstop. Mom had called 17 times and left 8 voicemail messages. Her first 3 screams were about how I had ruined everything. The following 2 were her crying and pleading with me to come home and help her get them back. The final 3 alternated between accusing me, apologizing, and blaming me again. I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, but I kept picturing Marco's expression as he finally realized what was going on. Sophie's mother had just finished preparing pancakes for breakfast when we heard a beating on the front door. Mom stood there looking as if she hadn't slept, her hair sticking up, and yesterday's makeup smeared beneath her eyes. I knew she was here. She pushed past Sophie's father to find me in the kitchen. "You're coming home right now, and we're fixing this." Sophie's father stood between us and told her she had to leave. Mom began yelling about how I was her daughter and that she could make me come home. Sophie's mother calmly picked up the phone and stated that she would call the police if Mom did not leave immediately. Mom gave me one more hateful glare before storming away. She slammed the door so forcefully that a picture tumbled from the wall. 2 days passed before I received a call from Mrs. Schneider at the school. "Sarah, I heard about what happened and wanted to check on you." Her tone was friendly and concerned. "I also want you to know that I'm proud of you for protecting yourself. She informed me that the school provided counseling services if I needed them, and that they would be there for me throughout this process. She recounted how several teachers had been concerned about my siblings for weeks and were relieved when someone finally interfered. 3 days later, I received an official notice for a family court hearing to determine interim custody. I spent the morning printing copies of the signed agreement, screenshots of Mom's texts from the previous weeks, and images I'd taken of the house deteriorating. I put everything in a folder and dressed well. The courthouse was downtown in an old structure that smelled like floor wax and old paper. I arrived early and sat outside the courtroom, watching other families come in and out. Mom arrived 15 minutes late, dressed in the same wrinkled shirt she had worn 3 days before. Her hair was greasy and twisted back into a sloppy ponytail. She had circles under her eyes and was constantly checking her phone as if she were waiting for someone. I knew her lover must have left when things got serious because she was absolutely alone. The bailiff summoned us, and the judge was an elderly woman with gray hair and glasses on a chain around her neck. She began by reviewing the CPS report, reading passages aloud regarding the house's condition and the children's statements. Then she questioned Mom about her parenting abilities. Mom started strong, stating that she had been overwhelmed but was willing to do better. The judge questioned her specifically about Elena's medical needs. Mom went blank and couldn't recall what pills Elena took for her allergies. The judge inquired about Marco's learning accommodations plan, which the school had sent home several times. Mom had no idea he had one. The judge looked at Mom for a long time before going to the bailiff and instructing him to bring Elena and Marco into her chambers. They both jumped up in confusion and followed her through the heavy wooden door behind the bench. Mom continued wringing her hands and looking at me as if I could somehow cure it. 20 minutes passed, with only the sound of the courthouse clock ticking. When the door eventually opened, Elena walked out first, her eyes crimson, and she refused to look at me. Marco hurried behind her, pale and terrified, as if he had just been told Santa wasn't real. They sat back down, and the judge waited another 5 minutes to write notes before speaking. She said that based on the home inspection, the children's claims, and Mom's obvious lack of fundamental parenting skills, she was ordering both children to remain in foster care. Mom would need to take a 12-week parenting course as well as individual therapy sessions. She'd also have to pass monthly home inspections before the court could consider reinstating custody. Mom began sobbing so loudly that the bailiff had to urge her to calm down. Mom's phone started ringing right as the judge was describing the visitation plan. She struggled to hush it, but I could see her work number on the screen. The phone rang again 30 seconds later. The judge advised her that if there was an emergency, she could step out to take it. Mom answered from the hallway, but we could all hear her through the door. Her employer informed her that due to her repeated absences over the last 2 weeks, they would have to fire her. She tried to explain the court matter, but they said she had already used all of her sick days and vacation time. Mom returned, looking as if she had been hit in the gut. The judge concluded by scheduling the next hearing for 3 months out and dismissing us. I got out first and was about to go to the parking lot when I heard someone shout my name. A woman with graying hair and Mom's identical nose approached me. It was Mom's sister, an aunt I hadn't seen since I was around 10. She said she'd heard everything from a cousin and wanted to see if it was as horrible as everyone reported. She told me she had no idea things had become so bad and felt horrible for not checking in more. Her residence had a spare bedroom, and she invited me to stay with her. I thanked her, but stressed that after 9 years of raising my siblings, I needed to focus on my own life. She nodded as if she understood and handed me a piece of paper with her phone number, instructing me to call if I changed my mind. Mom passed past us without saying anything and gave me a hateful glare. A week had passed, and I was at work at the bookstore when a coworker described seeing Marco at the grocery store with an elderly couple. She stated he appeared unhappy and was yelling with them over something. Later that day, I received a text from one of Marco's pals informing me that they were in different foster families on opposite sides of town. Marco appeared to be suffering with all of the rules, such as regular bedtimes and task schedules. Marco, according to the acquaintance, kept grumbling about having to get permission for everything when I used to just handle things without making a fuss. 2 days later, I received an email from Elena's orchestra teacher. She informed me that Elena had to drop out of the program since her foster family lived 45 minutes away from the school. The teacher replied that she was devastated to lose such a great kid and asked if there was any way to work things out. I wrote back stating that I was no longer Elena's guardian and that she should contact CPS. The teacher replied that she understood, but it was a shame because Elena had great potential. That weekend, I was completing schoolwork when Mom called and cried. She had just finished her first parenting class and couldn't believe how little she knew. They'd spent 2 hours just on child development basics, and she realized she had no idea what was normal for a 15 or 17-year-old. She stated that the instructor requested everyone to discuss their morning ritual with their children, and she was the only one who did not have one. She begged me to help her understand some of the material they were teaching, but I told her that would defeat the entire purpose of the classes. She hung up on me. I began to focus on my own life for the first time since I was 9 years old. I acquired extra hours at the bookstore and started saving money for college. I learned that I could still apply for spring admission to the state institution and began working on my application essays. One of my coworkers mentioned a support group for adults who had been parentified as children. So I decided to look into it. The meeting took place on Tuesday nights in a church basement. There were 8 other persons there of all ages. The facilitator asked us to go around and tell a little about our problems. One woman discussed raising her 4 younger brothers while her mother worked 3 jobs. A boy my age recalled caring for his disabled sister since he was 7, since his parents couldn't do it. Another girl had been handling her family's bills and appointments since middle school because her parents couldn't speak English properly. When it was my turn, I told them about the arrangement and what transpired next. Nobody seemed surprised or condemned me for allowing my siblings to go into foster care. The facilitator stated that what I had experienced was abnormal and not my fault. She stated that parentification is a form of abuse, even if it does not appear to be. Hearing other people's stories made me understand how twisted up my childhood had been. They all discussed the remorse they felt when they stopped taking care of everyone else. One woman claimed it took her years of treatment to realize she deserved to live her own life. The group provided me books to study and websites to look into about recovering from parentification. That same night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number asking if I could let him into the house to get his belongings because Mom wasn't answering her phone. The note indicated it was Mom's lover and he only wanted his work clothes and laptop. I looked at the message for about 2 seconds before blocking the number entirely. 3 weeks passed while I settled into a rhythm at my friend's house, went to work at the bookstore, attended support group sessions, and finally slept through the night. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, while making myself a sandwich in my friend's kitchen, I heard a loud bang on the front door. My friend's mother answered, and I heard Marco's strange, trembling voice requesting to speak with me. He stood there in shabby clothes with a rucksack that was far too heavy for him, his eyes red and puffy from sobbing. He began rambling quickly about how he couldn't stay in the foster home any longer, how they had all these regulations about screen time, chores, and homework checks, and how they forced him to go to bed at 10 a.m. every night as if he were still in elementary school. He kept telling me that I knew him better than anyone else and begged me to let him stay for a few nights till he sorted it out. My friend's mother stared at me with concern and uncertainty while Marco pleaded that he would sleep on the floor, eat little, and help with chores. My hands shook as I got out my phone and dialed the CPS emergency number they had given me in court. Marco's expression changed from optimistic to astonished to enraged when he realized what I was doing. He attempted to grab the phone from me, but my friend's mother intervened. The CPS operator took down all of his information and promised to bring him up within an hour. Marco sat on the front steps, unwilling to look at me or speak to anyone as we waited. The social worker who arrived was the same one who conducted the original inquiry, and she gave me a slight nod of approval as she led Marco to her car. She softly said that both kids were having difficulty adjusting, but were finally receiving actual treatment and support services that they had never had access to previously. She explained that Marco had been acting out a lot in his placement, which was very typical for children who had never had structure. After they departed, I threw up in the restroom and cried for 20 minutes. A week later, Mom called me, weeping over her home inspection. The CPS official had arrived to see if she had made the necessary changes to get the children back. Mom stated that the worker took one glance at the kitchen, which still had dishes stacked up and food spoiling on the counter, and began taking notes right away. Mom didn't know how to properly clean the mold that was growing in the shower. She attempted to do laundry but left damp garments in the washing for 3 days, which smelled terrible. The worker wanted to visit the kids' rooms, but Mom hadn't even changed their beds or cleaned up their clothes from the floor. The judge extended the foster care placement for at least another 3 months. Mom started crying about how unjust it was, how she was doing her best, and how no one taught her these things. The following Saturday, I was at the grocery store buying ramen and frozen pizza when I nearly collided with 2 of Mom's book club pals. They looked at me as if I were actual garbage. speaking to each other loud enough for me to hear about how I ruined my own family and placed those poor children in foster care out of spite. Mom had told everyone at church how I'd refused to help when CPS came and deliberately made things worse. They walked away shaking their heads and grumbling about ungrateful children. That same week, my friend's mother sat me down at their kitchen table holding a laptop and a folder full of papers. She showed me how to open a checking account online, explained minimum balances and overdraft fees, and demonstrated how to deposit checks using the mobile app. She assisted me in completing the FAFSA for college financial aid, which I was unaware of because my mother never addressed it. She showed me how to develop credit with a secured card and recommended websites for finding flats and understanding lease agreements. She made me practice writing checks and balancing checkbooks despite the fact that she claimed most people no longer use them. She discussed health insurance, auto insurance, and renter's insurance. Mom never taught me any of these mature stuff. Elena sent me a letter 2 days later, which she forwarded through CPS. Her handwriting was messier than normal, and the paper was stained with tears. She stated that I was selfish and harsh, and that I purposefully damaged her life. She claimed I could have mended everything, but chose to destroy the family instead. She said she hated me and never wanted to see me again. She claimed her foster parents were nasty and severe, and they did not understand her the way I did. She blamed me for missing orchestra, getting behind at school, and not having any of her belongings. The letter stung more than anything Mom ever said to me. My therapist at the support group helped me understand that Elena was dealing with trauma and sadness, and that expressing rage was easier than admitting she was wrong. She emphasized that children frequently blame the safe person rather than the one who wounded them. 3 weeks later, Mom called again, crying because she had received an eviction notice. Without my bookstore income to help with rent, and without me keeping track of when bills were due, she'd missed 3 months' payments. The landlord had finished providing her extensions. She couldn't understand how the invoices had accumulated so quickly or why the late fines were so expensive. She claimed she tried to create a budget, but the figures did not make sense to her. She was wasting money on takeout every night since she didn't know how to properly meal plan or buy. Her sister, my Aunt Gabrielle, who had previously offered to assist me, consented to let Mom move in temporarily. 2 months into the whole fiasco, I received a letter requiring family therapy. The judge had ordered all 4 of us to participate in a session with a court-appointed therapist. The letter stated that it was part of the reunion process and that attendance was needed. The session was set for the following Thursday at the courthouse. Mom arrived looking different than I had seen her in years. Her hair was properly brushed and groomed. She donned clean matching clothes and appeared sober for once. She'd lost weight and her vision was sharper. She sat across from me in the waiting area but did not attempt to communicate. When we were called in, the therapist asked us to sit in a circle with her between Mom and me. Elena and Marco sat on the opposite side, looking uncomfortable and irritated. The therapist began by asking Mom to share what she had learned from her parenting seminars. Mom spoke for 10 minutes on child development and age-appropriate expectations, and how she realized she had never known what children required at each stage. The therapist then asked her directly about my position in the family before everything happened. Mom became quiet and stared at her hands for a long time. Finally, she looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered the words I had been waiting 9 years to hear. She stated that she had forced me to be the parent, that she had taken away my childhood, and that she had been selfish, inattentive, and wrong. She stated that she now knew that what she had done to me was abuse, despite the fact that she had not hit me or intended to damage me. She stated that the parenting seminars made her understand how much harm she had caused all of us. It was the first time she had ever accepted genuine responsibility for anything. But as I listened to her, all I felt was emptiness, since it was far too late for apologies to repair the damage she'd caused. The therapist then asked Elena how she felt about everything. Elena's face crumpled and tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at me with a mixture of anguish and rage that made my chest tighten. She wiped her nose on her sleeve and told the therapist that she missed me so much it hurt. But she also despised me for allowing everything to fall apart. She asked why I couldn't just repair things the way I always did. The therapist nodded and explained calmly that Elena's anger toward me was intended for Mom, but it seemed safer to be angry at me. She informed Elena that I too was a child when I began caring for everyone and that it wasn't intended to be my responsibility. Elena began crying louder and harder until she was making these tiny gasps. The therapist offered her tissues and waited for her to relax before turning to Marco. My brother sat there picking at a hole in his jeans and refusing to look at anyone. The therapist asked him 3 times before he murmured that he realized what they had done to him was wrong. He explained that he knew I was basically raising children while mom did nothing, but he didn't want to give up having someone do everything for him. He looked at me for about 2 seconds and apologized, but I could tell by the tone of his voice that he was mostly unhappy. His carefree life had ended. The therapist made notes on her clipboard for what seemed like an eternity before glancing up at all of us. She recommended that we all continue with separate therapy before attempting to be a family again. She explained that mom wanted to prove she could parent, and I needed time to figure out who I was without having to care for everyone. Mom nodded and pledged to do whatever it took to bring the kids back, while I made it obvious that I would not be returning whatever. The session concluded with the therapist scheduling individual visits for everyone and informing us that this would be a lengthy process. 2 weeks after that session, I returned home from work to discover a hefty packet from the public university waiting for me. My hands shook as I opened it and read the acceptance letter, which promised me a full scholarship based on my grades and the essay I'd written about my situation. I sat on my friend's bed staring at the letter because I never imagined I'd get to go and start over somewhere new. My friend's mother caught me crying and comforted me as I showed her the letter. She helped me fill out all of the housing applications and even took me to campus for orientation. The scholarship covered everything, including books and meal plans, allowing me to focus on school rather than working 3 jobs. Meanwhile, Mom continued to attend parenting classes at the community center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She called once to let me know she had passed her first test on child development milestones. I could tell she was proud of herself for knowing what temperature to wash things at and how to check if meat was fully cooked. 6 weeks after the children were placed in foster care, she passed her second home inspection at my Aunt Gabrielle's residence. The judge reviewed all of her progress reports and granted supervised visits with Elena and Marco, beginning the following Saturday. Mom arrived 15 minutes late for the first appointment because she got lost finding the supervision center. The social worker had to remind her twice about the rules, which included not discussing the case or making promises about when they would return home. Elena spent the majority of the hour showing Mom her arithmetic homework, while Marco played with his phone and rarely spoke. The second visit went better since Mom remembered to bring refreshments, but she forgot Elena was allergic to peanuts and brought peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. On her third visit, she arrived on time with safe snacks, but was unable to assist Marco with his history project due to her lack of knowledge about the Civil War. She kept mixing up dates and battle results until Marco became annoyed and stopped asking. After 2 months of supervised visitation, the judge reevaluated everything and ruled Mom may see the children on weekends. They'd stay with their foster family during the week for structure and academic assistance, but spend Friday night through Sunday with Mom. Mom picked them up 2 hours late the first weekend because she forgot the end time of school. She wasn't aware that Elena had orchestra rehearsal on Saturdays or that Marco worked at the grocery shop on Sunday mornings. Mom gradually improved her memory of their routines over the course of 3 months, but she still made mistakes from time to time. The judge determined that the arrangement was working well enough to continue. During the week, the children enjoyed a stable environment with foster parents who knew how to help them with their homework and get them to school on time. August arrived and I packed my belongings into 2 bags and a backpack for college. My friend's parents took me to campus and helped me carry my belongings to my 3rd-floor dorm room. My roommate was already there unpacking what appeared to be her entire bedroom from home, complete with string lights and toss pillows. She complained that her mother had already called 4 times that day to see how she was settling in. "Okay," I said, nodding because I couldn't relate to having a mother who cared so much. That first week of courses seemed like I'd stepped into another planet where no one understood my tale. I might just be a typical college student concerned about choosing classes and locating the dining hall. 3 weeks into the semester, Elena sent me an Instagram notification. She emailed me a snapshot of herself standing next to a washing machine with the remark, "My foster mom taught me how to separate colors from whites." It wasn't much, but I was grateful that she wanted to spend this moment with me after everything. I liked the photo and responded with a heart emoji. A month later, Marco messaged me on Facebook, asking if I could review his college application essay. He began texting that he needed assistance with his grammar, but then stopped and wrote another message stating, "Never mind," because he remembered I wasn't meant to help anymore. We both texted those crying, laughing emojis, and something about admitting how strange things had gotten made everything feel a bit less heavy. Mom stuck to the weekend routine and was usually on time. The social worker's reports repeatedly mentioned minor gains, such as Mom remembering to prepare lunches and asking about homework even when she couldn't help with it. The judge reviewed everything at the following hearing and determined Mom may keep children for the entire spring break week to see how she handled it. I watched from my dorm room as Elena posted images of them at the park, and Marco shared a video of Mom attempting to prepare pancakes from scratch rather than a box. The pancakes looked dreadful, but everyone was laughing about it, which I had never seen before. When the week finished without any big tragedies, the judge authorized full reunification beginning after the school year ended. Mom had to continue attending therapy and parenting programs, but the children would live with her full-time at my Aunt Gabrielle's house. My aunt had practically taken over the responsibility of paying bills and buying groceries while Mom focused on learning how to parent. Mom texted me 3 weeks after they moved back, asking if I wanted to come for supper on Saturday. I gazed at my phone for 20 minutes before tapping yes. The drive to my aunt's house was strange because I had never been there as a visitor before. When I went in, the smell struck me first. Actual food cooking, rather than takeout cartons everywhere. The living room still had toys all throughout, but it was no longer a catastrophe zone. Mom came out of the kitchen wearing an apron I'd never seen before and with flour in her hair. She had made spaghetti from a jar and garlic bread from the freezer, but the table was set with proper plates and napkins. Elena handed me her report card after supper, pointing to each mark as if it were a trophy. 2 C's, 3 B's, and 1 A- in art class. She explained that she needed to study now instead of me doing everything, but her foster mother had taught her how to use flashcards. The grades weren't as good as when I did her schoolwork, but she earned them all herself. Marco took out his phone and showed me images of the grocery shop where he worked 3 evenings a week stocking shelves. He'd already saved $400 and decided to buy an old Honda once he had enough. His manager said he was one of the most dependable employees they had, which made him very proud in a way I had never seen before. After dinner, Mom asked if we might talk outdoors while the kids did their dishes, which was obviously their new duty assignment. She sat on the front steps and began crying before she could say anything. She informed me that her therapist had helped her see what she had done to me and how she had taken 9 years of my childhood. She apologized for forcing me to be the mother while I was still a child struggling to survive. She claimed she couldn't remember half of my upbringing because she was too preoccupied with guys and parties to pay attention. Her hands shook as she described how parenting classes taught her fundamental things she had never known before, such as checking homework folders and scheduling doctor appointments. She explained that observing other parents in the class made her realize how much she had failed all of us, but especially me. I didn't know what to say, so I sat there and listened to her list of everything she wished she could take back. When we returned inside, Elena was waiting by the door, looking worried. She asked if she may hug me, and when I said yes, she put her arms around me tighter than she had previously. She apologized for being harsh and for not understanding what I had been doing all these years. Her foster mother had emphasized that I was also a child and shouldn't have had to parent them. She said she now understood why I had to let things fall apart and praised me for being bold enough to save myself, even if it meant causing them pain. She drew back and showed me a bracelet she'd made in therapy with beads spelling out sister. She'd also made one for herself so we could match like real sisters. Marco walked over and did that uncomfortable male thing where he softly punched my shoulder and said, "Thanks for making them all grow up." He recognized that what they were doing to me was terrible, but he preferred that someone else handle things so he didn't have to. He stated losing everything made him realize how much I was carrying and how unfair it was for them to expect it. 6 months had passed since the initial CPS visit, and while nothing was perfect, everything had changed. Mom could now prepare 5 different dinners, all of which were basic, such as tacos and spaghetti. The children completed their own laundry and homework without supervision. I was taking classes that I liked and made friends who didn't know my entire situation. Mom would never win any parenting awards, but she was going to attempt for the first time in their lives. My siblings had learned to operate normally as teenagers, rather than expecting others to do everything for them. And I'd realized that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was the most important thing I'd ever done for all of us.